Hey developers, so today we're going to look at the Vue.Js Composition API. We're going to take a look at what it is, and I'm going to show you an example. Hey, and if you don't know, my name is Eric. I'm a full stack software developer. I'm also the author of the Vue.Js in Action book, which if you like to get the first chapter for free, I put a link in the description. So today I wanted to just kind of go over what the Composition API is in Vue.js and also do a quick example and take a look at why you may want to use it in the future. So I did a video very similar to this a few months ago when this was actually called the Function API. So right now it is called the Composition API, and this is some of the documentation on it. If you actually go to this GitHub, which I'll put a link in the description, you can actually try it out right now. So this is something that's going to be a part of Vue 3, but you can try it now with Vue 2 by using this plugin for it. So it's changing, by the way. This is based on an RFC that has been out for a little bit, but it's still in development and it's changing. So we're not quite sure if this will be exactly what happens and goes into Vue 3, but I think it's going to be pretty similar to it. So if you go to this GitHub here, it tells you how to install it. You just use npm install. It's pretty simple at Vue Composition API, and you just do that inside your Vue 2 project. And it tells you a lot about like how you set up TypeScript and then some limitations about it. So let's talk about the Vue Composition API. Now I stole this presentation from Natalia. I'll put a link in the description below. She does a good job of explaining it and giving a quick example. So in the past, people got confused that this new way of using Vue, this new Composition API, was a sort of replacement for how we do what's called the Options API, which is in Vue 2 right now. And that's completely false. As you can see here, it is purely additive, so don't worry about using this and thinking that you have to completely relearn Vue.js. No, this is just an additive to it, so the simplicity of Vue.js is definitely still there. But if you've come from the React world or you've heard of React and something called hooks, you're going to be very familiar. This is going to look sort of familiar to you, and it has some really good benefits. So I'm going to go through this presentation real quickly, and then we'll jump into an example. So of course, shout out to Natalia for making this. So why do we need a new API? So this is an example she gave here where it has this search here. This is Axios, this GET request, and then it returns back this information. And you have some information in this data object, and then you have this methods where you have the method information. And you can see here there's also a sorting. So now you also have some information how to do sorting. There's a computed property in there. So really we have one component, but we have two features into it. And so if you look at the component in whole, you'll see that at the top we have all this data information, and then we have the sorting information, and then we have the information of doing the search. So it's basically, if you look here, these things go together and then the grade go together. But so how do we compose reusable features? So right now there's mixins. So you could take, you can create like a search mixin, and then you can put all the data in there. So you would actually have a data object, have its own methods. You can do the same thing with sorting mixin. You can put all the data in one place and all the computed property in one place. And then you could use default the mixins and then import it into your project. But there's a few issues with it. It's not really reusable that well. I've never found mixins very helpful. I've never seen a big project that uses a lot of mixins. I think it has some namespace clashes too. It's conflict prone, and it's not really clear where everything's coming from. And then there's scope slots, which you can kind of looks like this, where you can pass things in, and in between the brackets you have data, and then you can bind data inside there. It's kind of complicated when you think about it. I think it's one thing that new developers really have troubles with Vue is kind of really getting how slots work, especially when you have more complicated slots. But it's not flexible and it's a little less performant. So what's the option? the new composition API. And I will should jump into a demo in 1 second, but I really like, if you look at the official documentation here, you could see here how you organize your code, where if you look here, this options API is sort of the default, and you can see here all the different colors. But when you use the composition API, you can kind of group everything together. So that's really nice. It also it's just a way to compose everything a little bit easier. You can see here it mentions mixins. Another pattern that you can use in Vue.js to help you organize your code is to use high order components or render list components via scope slots. And that can do this kind of similar reuse of logic. But as with all these, there's some definitely significant drawbacks, like we've already said with the presentation, that with mixins, it's difficult to tell which mixin a specific property is injected from. You have namespace clashing with mixins, and there's performance issues. High order components and renderless components require extra stateful component instances. While composition API, the properties exposed to the templates have clear sources since they're valued returned from composition functions. I won't go into any more of this, so let's jump into the example. So this is brewery search. So if this uses an open API that I found, which was really simple to use. So like, for example, if I just type in pub here, I have this fetching data, and then it just returns this data here. And this is all taken from a couple of different composable functions that we were able to put in using the composition API. So I went ahead and started a brand new project here, which is right here. And so we're just going to walk through it and see what it is. And if you're familiar with, you can just use Vue CLI, Vue create, and create a brand new project. And after you do that, you'll just need to install the composition API, which is this command right here, npm install @Vue Composition API. And by the way, I'll put this up on GitHub too. And then after you do that, there's one other thing you need to do, is you need to add this Vue.use, and then you add the Vue Composition API right there. So pretty simple. By the way, if you're interested, on this one, this is actually this is the Synthwave 84 theme. Everybody always asks me about that, and yep, that's what it is. Cool. So let's hide this control. Yep, let's hide this right here. And let's begin. So first, I'm just going to kind of wing this a little bit. So feel free to fast forward or pause if I go through it, or to follow along with the GitHub. I'm just going to create a brand new component here, and I'm going to call it search brews.vue. And I actually have this snippet. There's this snippet plugin extension that you can get for Chrome that allows you to just type in a small amount of words and hit tab, and pretty much you have everything here. And then I also, when I installed this version, I installed Prettier, so when I save it, it automatically formats everything for me. So I'm just going to do this here and do an H2 hello world. And I do have a little bit of a clicky keyboard, so I'll be aware of that. I'm going to go to the app.vue. I'm going to delete hello world and delete this and this. And actually what I'll do here is I'm going to grab my new search brews, and then from here we're going to do search brews.vue. And then we have to put it in here, search brews. And then finally, I'm going to add search brews here and save it, and we'll see if it updates. Cool. So we have our hello world. So that's good. So we know it's looking at our search brews one in here. I did say I was going to wing it, but I actually do have one thing that I want to do here is I have some CSS that I have. So I'm not 100% winging it. I do have a little bit of a project I'm following here. And since I don't think this is very important to this demo, I'm going to just copy and paste it, I think. There we go. And so what this is saying is I'm just putting in some search results, some brews, and I'm going to create some HTML here. And it's going to be really simple. Let's see here. So let me go ahead and add the HTML in. Okay, I got all my HTML in here, and just take a look at it. Yep, so this is what it does. Obviously, I don't have anything in here. I just have the HTML. So what I did is here is I have a quick section. I have this brew search h2 tag. I have an input tag where I have a submit button that doesn't really do anything right now. And then I have this div class search results where it's just a bunch of URLs, which are name, street, city, and zip, and then I'll actually put the values inside of it. So let's take a look how we would do this just normally without using the Composition API first. So I might do something like this. I have a data object, and I'll probably want like a value and a brewery's, I don't know, array. And then, which it doesn't like for some reason. Hold on. Oh, oops, we've got the return object here. Okay, we return it. And then we would need some methods to do something, and we'll probably want an async method for, I don't know, submitted. And in the submitted, we'd want to do our actual response. So let's just make sure this works. I'll put console log hello. And what we'll do here is on this form element, I'm going to do a v bind. Actually, let me think here. We want to do a submit. Actually, yeah, let's do a submit. And then we'll do prevent, and then we'll put submitted here. And what this does is every time the form is submitted, it'll prevent the default, so we don't have to do that ourselves. And then it'll call the submitted down here. And then for this, we'll just bind the input. We'll do vModel, and we'll bind that to val, which is the value. And we could probably even do like this. We'll just do install console log hello. Just make sure we have it. We'll console log this.val. And we'll open up an inspector. And I don't know, I always like this at the bottom. We'll look at the console. And I'll put ASDF. Cool. And I print it out, so we know that it's definitely working as we expect it to. There. Cool. All right, so now we need to actually do the fetch API call. So I made this async, so we're going to do a fetch call. So we'll do const response here. That's going to do an await. And that await's going to do a fetch. And then we're going to copy in the brewery API, which I got it right over here. And what we'll do this. So what this is doing, we're just using the fetch API. It's going to call the API open brewery, and then I'm passing in by name equals this.val. So I looked at the open brewery API documentation, and this is essentially it. After we get the response, we're going to get the JSON. So we're going to await the response.json. And let's just console log it out to see if it works. So let's see what happens. So if I put in, I don't know, pub. Cool, so I got an array back. Here's all our stuff. So that's easy. So now we just need to take this response, this JSON, and attach it to the brewery. So we'll do this dot breweries equal JSON. And then we want to kind of loop through it here. So I'm going to do a v4 here of brewery in breweries. And then it always likes you to do a key value too. So I'll do key equals brewery.id. I believe it is. And now let's just see if this works here. So now I can do brewery, and I believe the API is dot, let me look here, have it on my other screen, name. So now if I type pub here, cool. Don't worry about that error. That's something with a plugin I have. So cool, we're getting names back. That looks good. So I can go ahead and just kind of fill this out the rest of the way. So now I want in brewery dot city, and then brewery dot postal code, and then finally zip would be brewery dot actually this would be dot city spell it right, and this will be brewery dot postal code. Cool. So we'll try it again. Pub. Oh, we got an error. Said we have a problem somewhere. Let me take a look. Oh, I misspelled brewery. You need E there. Cool. Now we have everything, and now we have street, city, zip. Looks like I had city twice. This should be city, street. There we go. So now it looks all okay. Perfect. We're not getting any errors. All right. So now we've created it the normal way, but let's say we wanted to use the Composition API. So first thing we think of is we could probably put, this is two pieces of information. We have our data object and our methods, but couldn't it be cool if we could put this all in one place? So I'm going to create a new folder here called composables, and we're going to try to use this. So remember, if we need to actually create a setup object, so we can create a setup object here, and the setup object returns values that you can use inside your template. So the simplest of that would be like, first we would need to import ref from, and then it's /vue /composition API. And then I could do something like this. I could do const test equals ref. And what ref does is it makes your variable reactive that you can use inside your template. So I can put in hello Erik, and then I can return test. If I save it here. Oops, actually what you need to do, you actually need to put this in brackets as an object. You always return it as object. And now it's available inside your template up here. You can see hello Erik shows up. So now we also need to add in the breweries. So I'll just do it like this. I'll ask breweries. And what I kind of like when I do this is to actually create it as an object. And if I wanted to create it as an object, I use this reactive. So I'm going to use it as a object because it's an array of objects. So I'm going to create this reactive here. So I'll just add reactive at the top right here. And then in the reactive here, I will go ahead and add an object. And I'm going to call list here. And then I'm going to just do empty brackets like this. And I'll make sure I return it. And it doesn't have test anymore, so I'm going to return val. So just so I don't get confused, I'm going to take all this methods, and I'm just going to comment it out. Cool. So now we have this val ref, we have this const breweries, which is reactive list, but we really haven't done anything yet. So what we really need to do is create this async method for submitted. So I'm going to copy and paste this, and I'm going to bring it back up here. I'm going to uncomment it out. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do const submitted, and that's going to be a new async function. Async, and that's going to point to a new this submitted. And so what this is going to do, it's going to take our request, and then instead of doing this.breweries, because we don't have access to this, we're going to do the breweries that we created earlier dot list, and then have that equal the JSON that's returned. And then yeah, that should be it. One other thing we can do is return the submitted here as well. And then so now this submitted will be here, the submit.prevented, and now the breweries should be set. So let's see if it still works. So I'm going to type in, actually giving me an error that test is not defined because I still have test up here. Let me delete that. Save it. And now type in pub. Okay, it says val of undefined. Oops, because I come back down here. Should be now just val. Actually, since it's a reference, we have to do val.value. Okay, so actually we need to do one more thing here. Since we're using this reactive here, we actually don't, we want to destructure it when it comes back out. So we want to use toRefs. And if you look at toRefs, what it says in the official documentation is it's convert an reactive object to a plain object where each property of the resulting object is a ref pointing to the corresponding property in the original project. So this is really useful when you're using it with inside a function and you want to return it back. So we can do breweries here, but probably the best bet is to use toRef and then do toRefs of breweries. And then on top of here, we know it's breweries list because it's a list object. So now we destructured it. So we should have, it should have returned list. So instead of breweries right here, it'll be list. I save it. I come back here, type in something, and cool. Now we have all the values back again. So let's see in the composables, let's create a new file. And we're going to call it useBrewList.js. And I'm going to export default a function. And this function will be our brewery stuff. So let me grab the information from the component. So I'm going to take everything inside this setup function. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go back to our brew list and then paste it. And just make sure I have all the reactive hooks and everything, the hooks for it, and save it. So now what this is doing, it's basically doing the same thing, but it's within inside a function. And now I can go ahead and import that in here. So in the setup function, instead of doing all this, I'm going to import the this composable item. So we're going to call it use brew list. And by the way, and by convention, you usually use when you use these composables, these compositions, just like you do in React with hooks. Import use from, and then I'm going to put in slash composables, composables slash use dash brew dash list dot list. Should be it. I'll make sure this is actually right here. And then you can kind of destructure it like this. I can take everything from here and I can paste it if I can copy it right. So it's actually going to return us a list item list. And that's all going to be from the use brew list function. And then we just return it, the val list and submitted. And we don't need this right here. And let's see if it works. I type in pub. Cool, still works as it should do, as it should. So yeah, that was a really simple way of creating a composable. So now we have its own function. It's all in one place instead of being in multiple different places. Okay, well, that's it. So this is just a real simple example of taking this search functionality and then extracting it into its own function and putting it into its own composable API that we can then pop back into our own component in here without having all the extra information that you don't need. You can see here this is much cleaner, much easier to use. So, I really like it. It's definitely something that that I think makes Vue a lot easier, especially when you get really complicated components that have a lot of different parts. I'd like to hear what you guys think about it. So let me know. Thanks. Take care.